I have no conversation whatsoever with Holocaust deniers. They don't deserve my time of day. And they're people who, many of them, if they actually know what they're doing and are serious and not just lunatics or clowns, then, and there are those who are who can prepare a serious case, then they'll nitpick on a detail and say if they can show that detail, there's some doubt about all the facts of that detail in the Holocaust, that calls the whole thing into question. One of the famous incidents about that was in California decades ago in the Institute for Historical Review, which is a Holocaust denial institution. And they claimed that the Anne Frank diary is a forgery and that they'll give $50,000 reward to anyone who can prove that. They also claimed that there were no gassings in Auschwitz, and anyone who can prove it will get a $50,000 reward. Regarding the first thing, Anne Frank, the Dutch government, in order to put that one to sleep, actually appointed a team of historians and handwriting experts, all sorts of people, to pore over the Anne Frank diary and write long notes explaining different things in it. And they came to the conclusion that it's absolutely real and valid and whatever, thinking that would put the whole case to sleep. But of course it doesn't, because then they'll find something else. One of the things that they found about gas chambers was claiming that if you have this kind of gas or that kind of gas, it should leave behind this or that kind of residue, depending on what the gas was. And when you go to the camps and you scrape the walls and look at what was there, then you see that residue isn't there, so the whole thing is nonsense. Now, so I'm not a chemist, so if I actually wanted to counter that, I don't know what I would do, but I won't bother, because denying the Holocaust is like denying that there's a sky above. It's like denying that the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean exists. It's absolute lunacy, or much more likely, malicious anti-Semitism. And I have no conversation with people like that who deny facts. People I have a conversation with are the people who are, not well informed, not necessarily anti-Semitic or anything like that. They just don't know. And if someone who's a denier can make what sounds like a cogent argument and the person doesn't know, that person might be swayed. That's who my conversation is with. And that conversation is an educational conversation, all sorts of ways of dealing with that, with the innocent potential victims of those deniers. The evidence is overwhelming. How can you deny something happened when you have a few 100,000 eyewitnesses? How can you deny something happened when you have a few 100,000 photographs? When you have not only the victims as eyewitnesses, but liberators, neighbors of Jews, underground people from numerous countries, and on and on and on, who testify to this is what happened, this is what I saw, and so on. The Holocaust is one of the most extensively documented events in history. It might be the most extensive. I don't know. Maybe there's one that's more extensive, but it's one of the most extensive in history. To deny it, you have to have an underlying motive. Now, the motive for many of the deniers, like Ahmadinejad, but not only he, because he was kind of vulgar. There are those who are not vulgar and much smoother. But if they're coming from the right, in the political world, the far right, then they're basically coming, not Ahmadinejad, but others, from a pro-Nazi position. And their perspective on the world is, if we can undermine the truth of the Holocaust, we can rehabilitate Nazi Germany and highlight the quote-unquote good things they did, rehabilitate their name, and then people will admire what Hitler and the Nazis did, and we can bring that kind of thinking back into the mainstream. So we have to undermine the event. These are people who also argue that Jews, Zionists, Jews in general, Israel, are all part of creating this, part of this conspiratorial movement to sell this lie to the world, and that part of the Zionist movement's motivation in presenting this lie to the world was to get world sympathy, so that they'll get a state so they can continue milking the world for money and so on, and taking over the world. So in their thinking, if they undermine the Holocaust, it didn't really happen. They've undermined the existence of the state of Israel also. So they've harmed Jews. They've undermined the existence of the state of Israel because it has no right to exist if you say that it exists only because of the Holocaust and the lies of the Zionists. And then at the same time, they're going to rehabilitate the Nazis. That's coming from the far right. Coming from the far left, there's also Holocaust denial. And there, of course, they're not trying to rehabilitate the Nazis, but the undermining the state of Israel is a major part of what they're thinking there. And it's not just a question of being sympathetic to Palestinians, saying they deserve their own place in the world, their own state, etc. It's being viciously anti-Israel and anti-Jewish, that they deserve a state, you don't, is part of what they're saying. We're going to do everything we can to destroy the state of Israel, and the way to destroy it is to undermine the Holocaust. Now, there are people who are convinced by these things in various places, and that's the danger. What's more disturbing today and more widespread today is actually Holocaust distortion, which is, and trivialization. Trivialization, everything's the Holocaust. For years, there were people campaigning against abortions. Campaigning against abortions is your position. If you believe that they shouldn't allow abortions, that's someone's position for religious reasons, for other reasons, and they can argue the case. But to say it's the Holocaust of the unborn is taking it to a different place. That's not arguing the case. That's saying if I don't use the word Holocaust, I don't have a case. Everything's the Holocaust. And then you see that a lot. With a lot of things that aren't even as serious an issue as abortion. The distortion happens in many ways. It might be minimizing the numbers. Yes, it happened. Yes, the Nazis were horrible. They did try to kill lots of Jews, but only whatever number, not 6 million or close to that, but only 1 million or 1.5 million, as though somehow that makes it better. That it was only. Or those who will say, yes, it was terrible, but in my country, one of the countries where it happened, in my country, all of us did all that we could to try to help the Jews. But we were occupied, we were limited, and what could we do? And it's all the Germans, and we're all good people in that period in time. That's also not true. And there are various ways to distort the Holocaust and manipulate it for your own national or other motivations. And we struggle with that also, because they're not denying it. Yes, this is terrible. The Nazis did terrible things, and they killed lots of Jews, and they might even admit, 6 million or more or less. And as soon as you get to the but, then you have a problem. So that's where we basically have to make sure we stick to historical fact, even if you're not a historian. You're approaching the Holocaust in some kind of informal education from the perspective of literature, psychology, political science, philosophy, religion, whatever direction you're taking and discussing it, the foundation has to be sticking to historical fact and not fudging the facts. And then from there you can proceed.